2025 review continued. The year was not about rushing to an ending. It was about listening, learning, and letting the words grow. I spent this year writing at the crossroads. Stories where faith was questioned, challenged, misunderstood, and yet patiently explained. Stories where scripture was not used as a weapon, but as a light. Stories where characters did not always agree, but were always invited to listen. Conversations at the Crossroads. One of the defining works of this year was Conversations at the Crossroads. These were not debates meant to be won. They were encounters meant to be honest. Each chapter placed a believer and an unbeliever face to face, not to shout past one another, but to wrestle with truth. Misinterpretations of Scripture were brought into the open, not to shame, but to correct with patience and clarity. As the chapters expanded, so did the humanity of the characters. Recurring voices returned, not unchanged, but shaped by what they had heard before. And when the debates paused, the story did something rare. It reflected. A Bible study gathered the voices together, reminding us that growth does not always happen in conflict. Sometimes it happens in quiet understanding. Echoes and growth beyond the final chapter. From these conversations came echoes at the crossroads. This series asked a deeper question: what happens after the argument ends? The focus shifted from proving a point to becoming someone new. Characters carried the echoes of Scripture into their daily lives, discovering that faith is not confined to dialogue, but revealed through transformation. The planning of future arcs became just as important as the chapters themselves. Growth was no longer a moment. It became a journey. Grace, redemption, and the city. Another powerful thread this year was the exploration of redemption within familiar streets. Stories imagined grace moving through the city where I was born. Not as an abstract idea, but as something lived, struggled with, and sometimes resisted. Each chapter carried a reminder that redemption is not distant. It meets people where they are. The structure remained scripturally accurate, the language intentional, and the heart centered on Christ. Every word aimed to reflect truth without compromise and compassion without dilution. Nowhere in the shadows of storytelling. This year also allowed room for something different. The realm of nowhere. Here, archetypal horror figures were shaped not for shock, but for meaning. Legends, mythos, and rules were carefully built, ensuring that even darkness served a purpose. These stories reminded me that horror, when done thoughtfully, can explore fear, consequence, and morality without glorifying evil. Even in the world of nowhere, order mattered. Visual identity and voice. Alongside the written word, this year focused on presentation. Titles, banners, and visual identity were crafted carefully, always within policy, always with purpose. The name B.J. Mayfield became more than a signature. It became a consistent voice across genres, themes, and platforms. Whether gaming, storytelling, or scripture-based content, the goal stayed the same. Clarity, integrity, consistency. Scripture, spoken aloud. This year also marked a step into spoken word. Short Bible study lessons, opening and closing scripts, and audio-focused content were written with simplicity in mind. Not to perform, but to share. The emphasis was never on equipment or polish. It was on obedience. Looking back, this year of writing was not about how much was produced. It was about how intentionally it was written. Faith was explored without fear. Questions were allowed without condemnation. Stories were shaped with care. And most importantly, the work remains unfinished. Because growth does not stop at the final page. This was a year at the crossroads. And the journey continues.